You say yes. You always say yes. Not because you want to, but because you've already run the calculation in your head before they even finish the sentence. The guilt, the awkward silence, the way their face would fall, the story they might tell about you afterward. You've already weighed all of it in the half second between their ask and your answer, and yes just costs less. In the moment. It costs less in the moment. So you show up. You take on the extra work. You lend the money you don't have. You sit in the conversation you've been dreading for 3 weeks because someone else needed you to. And you tell yourself this is what good people do. Generous people, people who care. But there's this other thing happening underneath that. Something you don't say out loud. The slow, creeping awareness that the more you give, the less people seem to actually value what you give. The more available you are, the more they seem to reach past you to find someone they really want. You've been saying yes for years, and somehow nobody treats you like someone's yes actually means anything. That's not a coincidence. And it's not your fault in the way you think it is, but it is something you need to understand. Because if you don't, you'll keep handing out something that should be precious like it's free, and then wonder why no one treats it like gold. What we're about to get into goes several layers deep. Some of it will be uncomfortable. Some of it will land in a place you've never had language for. There are 4 specific patterns, 4 distinct ways this plays out, and at least one of them is going to describe you with a specificity that might feel a little too accurate. Stay with it, because the thing that makes people respect you more isn't discipline, it isn't confidence. It's something quieter and more structural than either of those things, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. There is a principle in behavioral economics, and before it was named, humans felt it in their bones for centuries, called the scarcity principle. The core of it is this: we assign value to things based not just on what they are, but on how available they are. A diamond isn't valuable because it's especially useful. It's valuable because it's hard to get. And the moment something becomes easy to get, the moment you can have as much of it as you want whenever you want it, something in the human brain registers it differently, not as treasure, as ambient noise. You felt this, not with diamonds, with yourself. Think about the person in your life you've always made yourself completely available to. Calls answered on the first ring, plans canceled to accommodate them, opinions bent to avoid conflict. Now think about how they treat your time, your input, your presence. There's a flatness there, isn't there? A kind of taking for granted that stings precisely because you've given so much that you thought surely, by now, the weight of it would register. It doesn't. Not because they're a bad person, because the brain doesn't work that way. When your yes is guaranteed, it carries no information. It doesn't tell the other person anything about themselves, about the relationship, about the request. It's just background. But a no, a genuine, considered, non-apologetic no, that carries enormous information. It says this person has limits. This person has a self. This person's yes, when it comes, is not automatic. And suddenly, against all intuition, you become someone worth pursuing rather than someone to pass through. Researchers studying social dynamics have found this pattern across relationship types, friendships, professional relationships, romantic partnerships. The people consistently rated most trustworthy, most dependable in a deep sense, are not the ones who never say no. They're the ones whose yes you have reason to believe. The scarcity principle isn't about being withholding, it's about being real. Your yes only means something if there's a genuine possibility of no. There is a person who has never once in their adult life said no to a request for help. Not a single, clean, unconditional no. And the way you know this isn't because they told you. It's because watch what happens when you ask them something. The pause, the slight tightening around the eyes, and then the yes. Always the yes. even when everything in their body is screaming otherwise. This person learned somewhere early that their value was conditional, that they were loved for what they did, not for who they were. So they made themselves indispensable. They made themselves the person who shows up, who handles things, who can always be counted on. And for a while it worked. People needed them constantly, and they mistook need for love. But here's the thing about people who are needed. They are used. Gratefully sometimes, warmly even, but used. Because you can't truly respect someone whose limits you've never encountered. Respect requires the possibility of resistance. The wound underneath this pattern is old. It's the belief that the moment you stop being useful, you become invisible. That love is a performance review, and you've been getting high marks by saying yes so long that stopping now feels like career suicide. Does any part of that sound familiar? Then there is a quieter version of this. Someone who says yes not out of fear of losing love, but out of fear of conflict itself. The fight that might happen, the silence that might follow, the shift in energy in the room if they say no. They have learned to read social atmosphere the way a weather forecaster reads barometric pressure. Before anyone else knows a storm is coming, they've already begun accommodation, already softened the yes before it's even needed. They are not people pleasers out of neediness. They are people pleasers out of hypervigilance. They grew up in a house where conflict had consequences, and they became expert conflict preventers. And it cost them the ability to disappoint anyone. The specific cruelty of this pattern is that people around them learn very quickly that there is no weather here, nothing unpredictable, nothing that pushes back. And so they stop bracing, stop considering. Stop checking whether the ask is reasonable because there's never been a signal that it might not be. The hypervigilant yes person has trained the people around them to be thoughtless, not cruel, just unchecked. And that's its own kind of loneliness. Being surrounded by people who've never had to think about you because you've never made them. But here is where it gets more complicated, and this is the version people talk about least. There is a type of person who says yes strategically, consciously. They know on some level that they are accumulating something. Goodwill, obligation, the right to call in a favor eventually. Their yes is an investment thesis, and they are playing a long game. And this works for a while. But the problem with transactional yeses is that the other people in the equation can smell it. Not immediately, but over time the yeses start to feel like invoices. The generosity starts to feel like a setup, and the relationship curdles in a way that's hard to name but impossible to ignore. A slow withdrawal of trust from people who can't explain exactly why, but feel in their gut like they've been had. Like all the warmth was a means to an end. This person's no, when it finally comes, feels punitive, because it was never freely given to begin with, and the people around them know it. And finally, there is someone who simply doesn't know they're doing it. They've conflated selflessness with virtue so completely, so early, so totally, that saying no doesn't feel like a boundary. It feels like a character flaw, like evidence that they're not in fact the good person they've been trying to be. Every no they swallow is accompanied by a small, quiet voice that says, a better person wouldn't need to say that, a more generous person, a less selfish person. And so they absorb everything, every ask, every imposition, every inconvenience, and they call it kindness. But there is a specific kind of exhaustion that lives in this, a bone-deep tiredness that doesn't go away with sleep because it's not physical. It's the tiredness of someone who has been performing goodness so long they've forgotten what they actually want. They've said yes so many times they can't locate their own no anymore. And when someone asks what they need, when someone actually turns it around, they freeze because they genuinely don't know.
Here's the thing most conversations about this get wrong. They tell you the solution is learning to say no, like it's a skill, like you just need practice. Like if you can get the word out of your mouth enough times, something will shift. But the word isn't the problem. The belief underneath it is. The belief is that your value is earned, that people's good opinion of you is a resource that can be depleted, and that every no is a withdrawal from an account you're not sure has enough in it.
And from inside that belief, saying no is genuinely dangerous. It's not irrational. It's a completely coherent response to the world as you've understood it since you were young enough to learn how love worked. So the question isn't, why can't you say no? The question is, what would it mean about you if you did? Sit with that, because somewhere in your answer, somewhere in the specific flavor of the fear, is the exact shape of the wound. What if saying no didn't mean you were selfish? What if it meant instead that your yes was real? What if the people who truly loved you, not the ones who needed you, but the ones who actually wanted you, what if they were waiting for you to have limits? Because a person without limits isn't a person you can fully see. What if saying no was the most honest thing you could offer someone who actually wanted honesty? This isn't a prescription, it's a question. But it's the one worth sitting with, because the version of you that can say no without apology, without 10 layers of explanation, without guilt preloaded into your voice, that version of you is not someone people will respect less. That's the version people will finally take seriously. Not all of what you recognized tonight was comfortable. That's how you know it was true. There was probably one of those 4 patterns that landed differently than the others. Quieter, closer, more specific to something you've lived rather than something you've observed. Carry that one. Not to fix it, not to build a plan around it, just to hold it a little differently than you did an hour ago. Because the hardest thing about this isn't learning to say no. It's learning to believe that who you are without all that yes is still someone worth staying for. That's the thing nobody tells you. Saying no doesn't just change how other people see you. It changes what you're willing to let yourself be. If something in this one hit closer than expected, that's the channel. Come back when you're ready for more of it.